Hi, Tyria. Happy Friday and welcome to Guild Chat. Thank you all for coming and spending some time with us this afternoon. I'm your host, Ruby, and today we're going to be talking about the new meta coming with next week's Living World episode, Jormag Rising. Assault on the Frost Citadel. A quick warning before we get started. We are going to talk about some gameplay spoilers. We're going to give you a little look at some images from the game. We won't be doing major story spoilers, so if you're holding out for that, you are pretty safe. We'll still try to warn you before we spoil you too much. So let's start by introducing our dev guests. I'd like each of you to go around and talk about what you worked on for this episode and what you do here at ArenaNet. Nick, why don't you go first?
Can do. Looking
Thank
into the
you.
camera. Hi, I'm Nick Hernandez, and I am a game designer here at ArenaNet, and I worked on the actual sieging of the Frost Citadel and everything inside of the Frost Citadel, amongst other things. But today we're here to talk about those things. So yeah.
Yeah. Kirk, how about you?
Sure. Hey, I'm Kirk WILLIFORD. I am a senior designer at ArenaNet, and I'm team lead for Jormag Rising.
Awesome. And Bryan, welcome to Guild Chat for the first time. Thanks for coming on as
Thanks,
a
Ruby.
guest. It's awesome to have you. So why don't you go ahead?
Hey all, I'm Bryan Yarrow. I'm a senior designer at ArenaNet. I helped out on making the boss that you fight after the Citadel Siege, the Claw of Jormag.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, well, why don't we start with an overview of the new meta? Kirk, as team lead, I'm going to poke you for this one.
Sure. So first, I want to give a little, set and how it fits in with the entire map of Drizzlewood Coast. The meta in episode 4 is divided into a couple different pieces. The ones that we're focusing on for this skill chat in particular, obviously, is the part where you are sieging the Frost Citadel, as well as the part that comes after that, which is the fight against the Claw of Jormag. That said, that isn't the only parts of the meta that we're adding in episode 4. There's another part before that. The big thing here is obviously the northern half of the map is now accessible. The way that the meta flows from episode 3 to episode 4 is, as part of natural progression. Something to note with that does mean that in order to get to episode 4's meta, you do have to complete episode 3's meta. It's all turning into one big meta, right?
Super
that
meta.
way the entire map feels, it's a super meta. So it's all feel as one big story. It's progressive. With that, obviously, the episode 3 meta takes its own set of time right now, as people are playing through it. We've made some tweaks here and there to the episode 3 meta in order for it to be quicker. That's not a case of us removing any content, but it's, we tweaked some numbers here and there. You're able to earn participation quicker by doing events. So you'll be able to get your rewards a little, the 10-minute supply drops still happen at the same time. But as you do events, you'll earn participation quicker. The amount of time it takes to fill that grand bar to launch your attack on the Wolf's Crossing and fight members of the Steel Warband, that will be done quicker. So the goal is, essentially, we don't want to have the both metas take an incredibly long amount of time. We want them to all feel like one cohesive package at this point. So we're trying to make them flow together in a way that feels good. So with that, I do, going into what you do on the episode 4 side. First off is you siege the bridge. You defeat the Steel Warband, and then from there you have a little bit of downtime. Go do sell your stuff in your inventory if you want to, or you can go kill the cache keepers, as you can do now, to get even more loot. But from there, you're able to storm across the bridge, take some areas over there. The progression on the northern side of the map is similar but different to episode 3's, whereas the southern half is a little bit more linear. The northern half is a little bit more free initially. So you're able to split out into groups and take control of different sectors by luring out Dominion tribunes. And then as you defeat those tribunes, you seize control of those sectors. And once you're able to take control of all of the sectors, then you're able to begin your push on the Frost Citadel. So whereas in episode 3, you can lose those sectors once you take them, in episode 4 side on the northern half of Drizzlewood Coast, once they're yours, they're yours. You are now the invading force. the Dominion forces are now the ones who are having to be on their toes and pull back and fall back to the Frost Citadel, right? So that's kind of the lead in to what brings us to taking on the Frost Citadel.
Awesome. Okay, that's a good overview, and we're on the offensive now, so go us.
That's right.
So why don't we talk a little bit about where you started once you knew, okay, this is the meta that we're going to be doing. How did you get started? What was the genesis for the overall idea and what you wanted to do? What direction you wanted to go with? Nick, do you want to, from your perspective first?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So with the Frost Citadel specifically, we wanted to kind of like, once again, like Kirk mentioned, encapsulate this entire push forward and really try to like show that they all of like the Dominion Char are like smart combatants, right? Like they're also they're also strong, right? We're not like the most powerful team on the planet. But we like with this side of things, we had a few goals. The first one was to keep that world feel, right? That you get in episode 3, but also kind of like evolve it a little bit. And then on top of that, kind of give everybody like a very cinematic, climactic moment, because like, you know, this is the second part of the map. This is like this is the climax to everything that you've been pushing forward for. So we really wanted to make sure that we could play on previous themes, make sure that it feels very similar to the episode 3 side, but also with a lot more uh, diverse flavor, for lack of a better term.
That works.
Yeah, and that's kind of it. Just like we wanted to make sure that it had that world feel. We wanted it to feel very cinematic. We wanted it to feel climatic, and we also still wanted it to feel rewarding, but in its own way, right? And that's all I'll say
Okay.
for now.
That makes sense. How about you, Kirk?
Nick hit it pretty well. I guess trying to think of things that I can add to what he said. Something we wanted to do very early on with introducing the Frost Legion is, it is a legion, and you know what legions do, they build citadels, so we wanted to find a way to incorporate that into this map and into the meta. What does it feel like to storm and siege a Char citadel? The Frost Citadel is the second citadel we've even seen in Guild Wars 2. The other one, obviously, the Black Citadel. So what does that mean? What do you expect to see in this kind of an area? And that means it's going to be pretty heavily fortified. It's going to be pretty difficult to get in there. The Frost Legion is very, very very strong. Just in their own, but then they also have a lot of things around them, the help of the Dominion forces, the help of a certain Elder Dragon kind of being around, the idea that the Claw is aware of also what's going on, and then there's some things in that you'll see in the meta, where they're employing tactics and using some weaponry that we've never seen Char use before, at least in game, right? So just having that all come together, and do things and form a cohesive experience from beginning to end in a way that feels truly like you are sieging a Char Legion citadel. That was a really exciting concept to us, and I am really happy with how it turned out. So
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited for people to get a look at it. Bryan, since you were kind of focused on the Claw of Jormag, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So this was like a really interesting and fun boss to work on, because obviously there's another Claw of Jormag in the game. People fight that claw all the time. So the question going in was like, how do we make this version of the claw different from the one that people are used to? So we ended up giving the claw some unique mechanics and trying to do some unique moments with them. So, like, for example, when you first encounter the claw, you've busted out of the back door of the citadel, and you kind of end up on this roost area. The claw, you don't immediately get to fight the claw itself. Like, you don't immediately get to go up to it and start hacking away at it. This is the claw's sanctuary. This is the claw's home base. So the claw is very ready for the players at this point. So the claw is hanging out on these spires, and the first part of the fight is figuring out how to get the claw down from there. And a little bit of spoilers, so you end up cooperating with some of your backup troops on the ground, where they drop off the scrap metal, and you rebuild these cannons up on the roof that you've used to blow the claw off of the spire. So just kind of, and then that transitions to a second phase of the fight, which I can talk about later. But that's sort of an example of how we tried to make it a little different, where just have a different memorable moments and different unique mechanics from how the original claw works. So it was interesting trying to get all those, because whenever you're making unique mechanics, you have to iterate on them a bunch. You have to test them a bunch. So it was definitely tricky to get some of them in the spots where we wanted, but we wanted to really make this feel like the capstone of the meta without also borrowing too much from what we'd done before, I guess, is the best way to put it.
That makes sense. Excuse me. So I want to in a little bit and talk about some of that iteration that you talked about, because the development story is, hey, here's the stuff that we tried, and here's how we made it better after we cried for a little while. It's always kind of nice seeing your successes. But let's talk about development and show a little bit of stuff off. Kirk, do you want to talk about, I know you shared with me, I think it was Megan's designs for the Frost Citadel?
Oh yeah,
I'm
yeah,
scared
yeah,
of
yeah.
saying it wasn't Megan. Okay.
No, it was
Do
Megan
you want to
Glennon,
talk
our
a
map
little bit
artist.
about that, and we'll show that off? And yes, Megan, you're
Sure.
amazing.
Before we get into that, I do want to actually clarify and correct myself, because it is Friday and it's been a long week.
It really
It is
has.
the third Citadel that we've seen. There is a dungeon and core game that is the Citadel of Flame, which was the Flame Legion Citadel. But it is still
Kmerg,
different,
how
right?
dare you?
Hey, case of the
It's
Fridays.
it's
You know how it goes.
it's allowed. We're honestly all just doing the best we can right now.
That's
So,
right.
all right, go ahead.
Cool. So Megan Glennon, our map artist, when we were trying to draft out exactly what the Frost Citadel would look like, we talked about a bunch of ideas with her and the entire art team, and she ended up drafting some concepts, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. And we're like, this is it, right? This is perfect. This encapsulates everything of what we kind of imagined with what we'd see from the Frost Citadel and the Frost Legion, with that, the cherry on top being that influence of Jormag. And it's just, it looks amazing when we see this artwork done by her. It's just, it blew us away, and we're like, yeah, we got to find a way to get this in game, right?
Definitely. Yes, thank you, Megan, because that was, I'm really proud of all of our artists, and it's great getting to show some of this stuff off. So, thank you for running us through that a little bit. Let's talk some more about development. What were some of your guys' favorite parts of development? Nick, I'm picking at random,
Around the
so I'm not like picking on any one of you in particular, but
okay.
we got to figure this out.
For the like Frost Citadel itself specifically, because there's a whole bunch of other stuff that I was like, oh, so good. But I would say that like the tank fight for me was the first thing that once it got working, and once I was able to actually see it and be like, this is something that we can keep, something we can ship with, it was like a huge just moment of like excitement and relief, because we're doing something that we've never really done before with that tank. Actually, I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna get Kirk's approval. Can I actually talk about like that part in the preview?
My approval. That's how guild chat works.
That's exactly how Kill Chat works. He's my team
Hey,
lead. I gotta make sure.
Please
I'm not his
continue, Nick.
team lead. I am
Okay.
touching this.
So this is actually the first time that we're going to be able to fight a moving prop boss. Whereas like before in the game, like whenever you see kind of movement, I think Cameron Rich did a beautiful kind of like blog post on Drakkar and kind of like the inner workings of Drakkar. But to kind of summarize that, Drakkar was like, I want to say like 18 different prop bosses with a lot of like art transitions. And with this tank, we had this model and we wanted to utilize it. So we tried to figure out a way to actually like incorporate that model of course, an updated version of it with
Mm-hmm.
it being a prop boss and kind of like working on some new tech to be able to actually get prop bosses moving. As you all could probably imagine, shout out to Joel. I'm gonna always butcher his last name. Helmich?
Helmick.
Joel, for long story short, because
Joel
he's the
H.
one that really, yeah, he like broke into that code and like just cleaned a bunch of it up so that we would actually be able to do it. And once we actually got that working, it was like, it's like you see your creation, and you're like, oh, I love it. Like you start crying from how beautiful it is.
Aw.
I will not lie, I teared up a little bit. And that's my piece. That's mine.
I could see
So
Nick
can I
glowing
ask?
from here.
Aw,
It's so
I
good.
love
I'm
it.
sorry, like no joke.
You're allowed. It's okay. Can you do me a favor though? There is one person does have a question about what is a prop boss, and every once in a while we explain what that terminology means. But can you do it again? Because it's been a while.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
So prop bosses are these basically they are props, right? So our props are like the environment pieces that you see in the world. Like the Frost Citadel is a bunch of props stuck together. Any like tents that you see, any buildings, that kind of stuff. Prop bosses are moving versions of that. So if you look at like any of the world bosses in our game, like the Shatterer, the other Claw of Jormag, things like that, like they are bosses that are very big, very spectacle-esque, and they're specifically bosses that have collision, so like you can run up against them and you won't be able to pass through it, like you can with some enemies. Um, so, but with those, like because of that, those always had to be static set pieces because they were actually placed by our map artists, and we couldn't get them to move before. So like Drakkar was actually like 18 of those things, and then it's like he would have effects play through other things to like show those transitions, and then one would unlurk where it's like it actually comes out and you can attack it. I hope that answers the question well enough.
I think so. We talked about that with Claw Jormag, with Drakkar back when on a previous guild chat, and I think we showed a little bit of all of those little hidden Drakkars here and there.
Yeah, which shout out to
Which
Cameron Rich. That fight is absolutely amazing.
yeah. Thank you, Cameron. Bryan, how about you? What were some of your favorite things about working on Claw of Jormag?
Honestly, it was kind of similar because having just working on the boss, there's a lot of stuff that's coming together as you're building it and you're iterating on it. You're playtesting it and you're like, oh, it's not feeling the way I want it to. And then kind of how Nick was describing that, the moment when it really feels like it starts to finally come together, and it's like, oh yeah, this mechanic that I was hoping would feel good is finally starting to feel the way I want it. So in phase 2, for example, and phase 2 I think was a really, really satisfying to work on for the Claw of Jormag. So phase 1 is what I mentioned before. They're up top on the roost, on the kind of roost area. You knock them off, and then they fall down to a plateau and get kind of half buried, so they can't fly away. And did I just cut out? I see my. Nope, I'm fine. Okay, sorry.
I can hear you. You're fine.
So that second part, you're fighting the claw on kind of like this small plateau above a bunch of ravines, and one of the claw's signature abilities is to do this big wind burst that blows everyone back towards the cliff edge, trying to blow them off the cliff. And that's obviously, the boss does a bunch of other stuff, but that's kind of like the signature moment that we wanted to get feeling right. And that kind of happens in concert with different avalanche attack that creates a whole bunch of boulders that fall from the upper part of the cliff and land in the battle area, and you can hide behind these boulders to not get blown off the cliff. So figuring out the placement of the boulders, how many of them we needed, how spaced out they should be, how far from the claw they needed to be, and then how often the claw did the wind attack, how long that wind attack lasted, all these little timing details and spatial details that went into it, and we really needed to play around with it a bunch before it started to feel the way we wanted, where players were at risk from getting blown off the cliff, but also at all points felt like they could take an action, fight against the wind, get behind a boulder, and avoid, a grisly fate of being blown into the Jormag, the blooded Jormag down below.
He almost said it. He almost said it.
I almost said it. We had like a whole discussion
I'm just-
earlier about. I wasn't even sure of the front-facing name for that stuff.
Yeah,
It's okay. Well,
there's
it will slip at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
only a couple more days to wait, and then you guys can spoil the whole episode. So, Kirk, how about you?
Let's see. My favorite thing, seeing the iteration on just all of the encounters in the Frost Citadel. But going into the claw part, you know, it was interesting to see that kind of that entire encounter come together. Because it is, whereas in core, the Claw of Jormag is kind of its own encounter, like, you know, dedicated encounter. This one is obviously part of a bigger whole. So it's, you know, we kind of see the Claw and this Frost Citadel as one big encounter.
Mhm.
And we could, that, you know, that in itself is challenging, just because it's a very long encounter and there's a lot of stuff to
Yeah.
watch out for. So how do you go about balancing that and having it feel exciting but not exhausting, but possibly exhausting in a good way? You know what I mean? And so, you know, there's things that we have to do here and there to kind of like ease in and out of that, to create some ebbs and flows of having big peaks, you know, big awesome signature moments in different places. So like one of my favorites is like Bryan was saying, you know, trying to build up the artillery to shoot down and wrangle this dang claw, right? Because it's just going everywhere. It's not very happy with you, kind of wrecking its home. And so the first step is just trying to get a hang of it and be able to attack it, you know, and just seeing all the cool explosions and spires kaboom. It's really cool, and lots of stuff to keep an eye out on. But then it also, you know, that isn't it. There's even more to come later, and then combine that with all the cool things that you're seeing inside of the Citadel. It just all comes together, and it feels really cohesive and awesome and unique in the sense that it's like almost like a mini dungeon, or you know, Nick, I know you can talk about this more, like the general feel of the progression through the Citadel leading towards the Claw.
Yeah, that something you mentioned, feeling exhausting kind of in a good way. There seems to be a very fine line. There's like a narrow path of, okay, this is enough to make it feel like, oh, we did it. We actually accomplished this. We did something big, and not, oh my God, this has been going on for a week. So that's
Yeah.
thank you for
Yeah, the
working on
challenging
finding
thing
that
with
little
that,
path.
yeah, no
Mhm,
problem. The challenging thing with that, though, is that, you know,
mm,
it's a case of respecting the player's time is an important part of game design, right? And getting into that is, this entire thing is obviously a big investment for players to participate in, and being able to reward them along the way. And so if you're only able to play for a couple of minutes, or, you know, a half hour or what have you, not maybe be able to experience the entire thing, we still want to respect your time. We still want to reward you for the time that you put in. And so we're able to
yeah,
have, you know, bits and pieces here and there, and showcase moments, not just at the very end, right? They're all along the way.
right.
And that's super cool, and one of my favorite things about this entire map as a whole.
Yeah. Nick, do you want to touch on what Kirk called you out for in the best of ways?
It was more specifically about like the feel of the thing, right? Um, sure. Is that like are we moving into the part where like we show all the pretty pictures, or
I would
is this
love
kind
to
of
show
like
all the pretty pictures.
cool? Yeah.
Yes,
So
let's show the
before
pretty
we kind of
pictures.
before we tangent into that, I kind of want to touch on one thing that Kirk said, which is like
Sure.
something that I noticed during the development of this claw fight is that like this claw seems to be a lot smarter, for lack of a better term, than the previous ones. Like the previous ones were like a lot more, you know, they ship the Corteria, so it's very stalwart, and it like stands its ground and things like that. Whereas this one, you know,
Mhm.
it's a lot more like, it's like, I got wings, you don't. I'm gonna use them. And I really just like throughout the entire Frost Citadel, like I love kind of how cheeky and smart the claw can be, comparatively to, you know, claws we've seen in the past and things like that. Um, so yeah, that was that. As for the actual Citadel part itself, this is the part where I transition into dev talk. Um,
Yay!
We wanted to go for a kind of mixed feeling, where when you're outside of the Citadel, we wanted to really feel like a kind of a world v world siege, right? And so like actually before I go into that, I apologize. I'm gonna backtrack mentally a little bit. Let's talk about the ideation phase of it, right? So Mark, if you want to pull up the first picture. Um, uh, we actually started brainstorming this way back when we were actually still in the office. So here's a rare picture of a whiteboard that we actually can get during this development phase because yeah, we didn't have much time in the office,
Man.
unfortunately. But as you can see, like just a bunch of doodles and angry faces, and actually, I'm gonna pull it up also on my side because for the stream, like our stuff is pixelated, so it's harder for me to
Yeah,
actually see it.
it
Yeah,
just looks like a
but
lot of dots to us, you guys.
yes, it does. Okay, opening up all the pictures for myself.
Sure. And while Nick is opening this was before March then, because we started working from home at the beginning of March.
A different
Yes,
era.
So
Yeah, the
a
episode
different
4
time,
and
if you
episode
will.
3 teams were trying to work together the best that they could as, each team was trying to build up a little bit. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
fortunately, before
So
we transitioned to work from home, there was a little bit more, there's some cross-team communication there. Sorry, Nick.
Yeah.
no, you're good. All right, I got the pictures up. But basically, like with
Okay.
the first one that we were looking at, it's really about like here's like how do we kind of encapsulate this entire encounter? How do we break into this thing and then feel like the break-in was worth like the investment time and also kind of like flow naturally into the other part. So as you can see, like there's just a bunch of like we threw a bunch of stuff at the wall and it's like we have like we knew we needed X amount of rooms. We knew we had like Y area coverage outside, X being like the number of rooms and Y being like the total radius of outside area. And then we were like, how do we merge those two things? How do we blend them? And then while also keeping in mind the claw fight that comes afterwards. And then like the first ideation phase was a lot more crazy. Like we just, like I said, throwing everything at the wall and trying to see what stuck. But as they say, you can't ship with everything. So if we move on to the next picture, we took all that and kind of condensed it and streamlined it into like, okay, each room kind of flows into each other. The outside is all working towards a singular point, a singular goal. And then like we have all of that kind of blend together. And like I'm not going to be going too much into like the specific details of this because I want people to experience that for themselves. But what
Mhm.
I can kind of go over is the generalizations of like outside is very worldview world kind of mentality, more specifically where it is world players are really good at like when you siege a keep, you siege from a distance, you build your trebuchets, your catapults, and you poke as much as possible so that way when you do go in, you're gonna have an easier time than just going right up to the gate and getting bombarded by your enemies. So that we kind of do that vibe, and then the second you actually break into the Citadel, we wanted to experiment a lot more with like an instancy raid feel. So so while we still kind of like touch on World v World esque gameplay,
Mhm.
it's kind of more of like what Kirk was saying, like a mini dungeon, a kind of like instancy raid thing, because we wanted to be a lot more cinematic with this experience, right? We wanted to hit on a couple of goals, keep that World v World feel, but also add in the instancy/raid feel and really highlight kind of like the strength of the Frost Legion, because like while this is a citadel, like they haven't been here for that long, right? So it's not like
Mhm.
when people think of Citadel, like when I think of Citadel, I think of like the Black Citadel, right? And that thing is
Yeah.
massive, but that was built over
Yeah.
a very very long time. Whereas like these like this Legion has only been here for a little while, so it's like how did they reinforce this area? How did they like use the time that was allotted to them? Um, and then yeah, that's pretty much like the generalization of it. But if we move on to
Mhm.
the next picture, um, uh, this is the outside part. So like shout out to once again Megan Glennon. She is an absolutely amazing map artist, like 12 out of 10. Fantastic, because
She's so good.
She's so good. The amount of like you see all this beautiful stuff, right? But like there was a lot of back and forth between her and I when it came to like keeping this amazing beautiful feel of the map, but also like allotting like spaces to feel useful for like encounters and things like that. So this green path is kind of like the outside path that you take. And all of the X's that you see were actually me being like, okay, Megan, I need like a ramp here, 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 and here, because when you're like, as you probably saw in the actual trailer, all of this area is really broken up and like it's hard to traverse. So it's like getting NPCs to traverse between those areas was a little difficult. So I was like, can we pretend that the Frost Legion, like made it easier for themselves to walk through here? I know they got portals, but yeah. So a lot of that was basically like a healthy amount of back and forth and kind of working together to really make the outside still feel beautiful, still look realistic, but also be able to support the gameplay. And I'm going to go a little bit faster through the rest of these. But if we go to the next picture, which one is the next picture? Yeah, my favorite picture.
Yes, the cool kids.
Yeah, the cool kids, like we like to call them. It was then like we were adding the Frost Legion, but the Frost Legion was still something that we were working on. So we had to figure out a way to like temporarily distinguish them from the Dominion because they're all Char, and we can't just have them looking like Char because, or like looking like the Dominion Char, because then it's going to just feel like you are fighting the Dominion Char.
Mhm.
So I can't remember who, but somebody made like all those ridiculously beautiful temp composites, and like they had like some base skills, and we just kind of like slapped them in there, and it really helped the feel of everything. And they like you will see them sprinkled across the room, but they are like they are utilized, and they will have specific mechanics that you'll see that differ from the rest of the Dominion forces. And then if we move on to the next thing, like we're kind of going in order of like what actually happens with
Oh, this is my favorite one.
the thing. Yeah. So after that, after we looked at that, then we started looking at the tank fight, and we were like, okay, we have this moving platform that people can actually stand on top of and like punch, right? Um, and I like it when people can punch, but the thing is like this is a big tank, right? If they're standing on top of it, how do they get off? So I was in a call, I think, with Lee Bledsoe. I think it was either Lee Bledsoe or James Barwick. I can't remember. James Barwick is the animator who worked on this tank, which or he was the prop artist who worked on the updated version of the tank, and he also did some animations on it. So shout out to James Barwick. He did an amazing job. But it was one of those two, and basically the miss there was like we needed to figure out a way to get people off of the tank at certain points. And as I was like doodling that for him, I noticed that it looked like an animal kind of, so I like drew it like an angry face as I was just talking, and then like I was like showing the bounding box, and then I was like box, ox, and I like I underlined ox, and then I added some stuff. And like
Somebody
that,
noticed it has a nose ring. So
it does have I mean, like like bulls have the nose ring, oxes have the nose ring.
I
They got
love him.
horns. Just gotta make sure. And then yeah, so like that was one of the core things that we need to figure out for the tank fight. And then if we move on to the next part, it kind of like encapsulates all of like the like foundational main things that we wanted for the Citadel specifically, which is in the Citadel, we wanted you to feel like you were uh hecking stuff up, as they say. So we did a lot. We looked into like what are the best props to punch, right? Like if I'm going into if I'm going into a place, I just want to like Wreck-It Ralph it, right? Just break everything. And we wanted players to kind of get that feel of like actually creating destruction and doing hard damage to not just the enemies but the Citadel itself. So we spent a lot of time looking into like is it better to punch like a machine, a wall, pipes, right? Levers, doors, like, and then also incorporating that world feel of like we punch doors in Worldview World. So it's like, how can we add those doors to punch, right? What are other things that we could punch? Basically, there's a lot of punching in this episode, both of baddies and of their shiny toys. So, um, and like that's all I kind of want to give away around the development of that stuff for today, just because like this is the preview. We'll hopefully go a lot more in depth at third ships, but I wanted to give
We will.
y'all kind of like an idea. And stay tuned, as I like to say.
I
Those are all my
appreciate
words.
that. Was that all? Was that all of our pictures? 'Cause
I
we're
think that was
saving
all the
some for
pictures.
next week.
Yes,
We're
there were
saving
a lot more.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mark says that
Ruby and
was
actually had a
all of the pictures right now.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Ruby and I actually had a call right before this, and there was like 15 more pictures, and then we were basically just like, let's save a bunch of these for after, for the next one,
Yes.
because there's a lot more stuff that's a lot more juicy, but we don't want to spoil the encounters in the Citadel. So
Yeah.
go play it.
After you guys have had a chance to play it, go play it, but not yet because it's not out. So, something that we have touched on a couple times in the show was iteration, and I promised to come back to Bryan for that. So I want to just talk a little bit about iteration on the Claw of Jormag and things that you poked at that maybe didn't work and things that got made better in development.
Yeah, there was a bunch of stuff that. So while kind of like the basic ideas around what we were doing for the claw, so like in phase one having the shooting the claw with the cannons, or in phase two having the claw blow players off the cliff, those ideas mostly were like we managed to make them work, but it definitely took a bunch of iteration to get them right. I kind of touched on that last time I talked a little bit. Just phase one is a really good example here. So because the claw is kind of up on his roost and not immediately attackable, we found early on that if that phase lasted too long, players started to get frustrated where they're like, I just want to hit the claw already. I don't want to do all this stuff with the cannons. I'm bored with the cannons. I wanna go and fight the claw. So we played around a lot with the pacing and overall length of that phase because we didn't want it to go too fast. We still wanted it to feel like a challenge to the players. We still wanted the players to get a sense of satisfaction when they
Mhm.
see that that final shot of the claw being knocked down into the phase two area. But it also needed to be paced out correctly and not last too long. So players, how many, so we iterated a lot on, for example, how many scraps do the players need to bring for each cannon? How many times do they need to repair the cannons? How many different kind of mini phases need to happen within that phase one? How many enemies should there be kind of ambiently that the players need to kind of carve their way through as they are interacting with these cannons? And how often should the claw itself be attacking? Because the claw, even though the claw isn't attackable by the players, the claw is attacking the players. The claw is breathing down,
Mhm.
big ice blasts of various types that the players need to watch out for as they're kind of scrambling around
Sure.
trying to hit these different cannons. And then also, if we wanted to extend that phase one, I'm trying to figure out exactly how much I want to say and how much I want to keep back and let players find out for themselves.
Yeah.
We wanted to extend that phase one out a little bit beyond just having kind of ambient ads. So we tried a couple of different ideas for what those could be, and we settled on one that I like quite a bit. And just to give a little bit of different pacing and texture. So if you're repeating the same actions over and over again, it'll feel longer than if those actions are slightly different, or if the obstacles towards completing those actions change. So I know that's a little bit cryptic. So hopefully folks will understand what I'm talking about when you get in there and play it. But yeah, that was the sort of stuff that we iterated on. It was very much feel like how it felt to play, because the ideas I think were pretty solid from the beginning, like the core ideas of what we wanted the claw to be doing. It was just a matter of getting all the little details correct. All those like
Mhm.
details that are both obvious and a lot of details that are hidden. And when you're working on game dev, you create a piece of content and you have an idea for what that piece of content is going to be, but you learn a lot about it as you're building it, because it's just always going to have some unforeseen interactions. Games are complicated,
Mhm.
so you always have to
Mhm.
kind of adjust on the fly uh, as you're building something to nail the feel, the exact feel and experience that you want.
That makes sense. Um, how about you, Kirk? And actually, a quick note, I'm very excited for players who are watching to get in there next week and start playing and then realize, "Oh, that's what he was talking about. Oh, okay." So thank you for setting the stage, Bryan.
I'm just trying to, I don't know, just trying to hopefully not give too much away while also talking about some of the more interesting parts of it.
You did good. Kirk, do you want to talk about iteration on your end a little bit and things that you worked out as you went? Oh, you might be muted.
Kirk, you're 100%
There we go.
muted, yeah.
I'm good at work, Twitch, and all that good stuff. Sorry about that. I was getting some water. Anywho, so the big thing for me as I was working on this release was finding a way for episode 3's meta and episode 4's meta to come together, right? You know, as I was also team lead for episode 3's release, just trying to find. I was able to kind of keep an idea of what the goals are for both, but also trying to figure out with the rest of the Guild Wars 2 team, Andrew Gray, Ben Kirsch, and a bunch of other design leadership, how can we get these two maps or releases in the same map to coexist? Do we want to have them running at the same time? Do we want to have them running one after another sequentially? How do we want to do that? And as I mentioned before, what we ended up settling on was having it be more, a linear progression as you keep pushing north. But that took a lot of iteration, particularly the flow of episode 4 side before you get to the Frost Citadel, because we wanted that to feel similar to what you're doing on 3 side, but different, right? We don't want to feel like you're just doing the exact same thing over and over again in the next episode. We want to, how can we make this feel different than what you've been doing before? So that's why we were able to look into having it be a little less linear. You can go in any order, capture any of the sectors that you want. You can capture them all one by one if you want to do that. You can do all at the same time, et cetera, et cetera. The goal is ultimately control these areas to be able to push towards the Frost Citadel, but it's done in a different way that feels more feels fresh, and that way you're not just doing the same thing over and over again. So
More
that was
progression
probably the
and
part
less
that took.
repetition.
Exactly. Yeah. Well said. That took a lot of iteration. That was one of the big things that we kept trying to refine over and over and again as very late into development, just because that is something we really wanted to get right. And work together with Nick and Brian and say how does this meta flow into 4's, or how does 3's meta flow into 4's meta, which flows into this Frost Citadel, which flows into the Claw. Like, how does this all come together and feel good? And then on top of that, like, well, how do we clean this all up? Like, when you complete it, what happens? Like, how do we get this to flow good? How do we get it to reset in a way that makes sense? And so that took a lot
Sure.
of going back and forth. But what we settled on ended up being pretty damn cool. Oh, excuse me, dang cool.
Yeah, that's the first time that's happened on this show.
Oh, heck.
Oh, heck.
Yeah,
worse things have
Again,
definitely
Friday.
been said.
Worse things have absolutely been said on this show.
Yeah.
You're fine.
Can I actually just add one more thing to what Kirk was saying,
Please.
if I may?
Yeah.
Like as we've kind of mentioned during this during this talk, so far, like iteration was iteration was the name of the game when it came to this entire map and kind of the push for episode 4. And I just want to give a shout out to the entire team, because to iterate that much to kind of solve all of these problems, which are very large problems. I know that we make it sound like they were just easy, but in reality, they're when we adjust one thing, it's kind of it's like trying to tighten the bolts on cars on a train as it's moving, right? So we need to be very careful with how much how much we tighten or loosen it, because it can be catastrophic in other areas. And all of that kind of exacerbated by the quarantine and COVID, um, definitely made us kind of look at everything that's been going on, look at it from just a top-down holistic viewpoint, and really try to find the fun with the amount of time and bandwidth that we have given the quarantine. And I think that we did a really great job, and I just shout out to the whole team, because it really couldn't have been done without everybody.
Yeah.
Completely
Well said,
agree.
Nick. Well said.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So that's the bulk of our preview. I want to make sure, is there anything else about the content that you guys want to add within the confines of what we talked about?
The
think I'm
map's
Giving you
probably
your
pretty.
chance
good,
for
yeah.
final thoughts.
It's
Trying to
really
think of something.
exciting. So yeah. It's a lot of really cool content. It's done in a way that it's experimental in the sense that it's a little different than what we usually do. Whereas episode 1 and 2's metas, they work differently than episode 3 and 4's do. Just trying to find ways for all of the content that we release in Icebeard Saga to feel good and standalone, but different, right? Drizzlewood Coast comes together as one really awesome, fun, enjoyable map. And it was a blast to work on. It was a blast to work with Nick and Bryan and everyone else on the team to get this thing done, especially as Nick said, in the state of the world right now. We all try to stay positive. Communication is key. We're all in it together and we worked together great. And it was just a blast to work on. So.
That's so good.
And I want to reinforce that too. It really super was a team effort, just because even though I was responsible for the Claw, and Nick was responsible for the Citadel, and Kirk was team lead and everything. Even though you had a smaller number of people building it to test it, internally, it really did require everyone jumping on, because this is content that's made for a large scale group. So organizing all that, everyone giving their time to help us test this stuff out and make sure it's ready. It really definitely was a team effort, not just the people who were directly building it, but the people who helped us find all the issues with it and gave us feedback that helped push us in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone from beginning to end did really good work.
Yeah.
So
Hard
agree. Do you guys feel ready for next Tuesday? And there's just screaming.
Yeah.
I mean, as ready as I'll ever feel. There's always, when you build
yeah.
stuff for game dev, you never release a perfect product. I mean, maybe some people are lucky enough to release the most perfect product, something that they're totally, everything is, done and fixed exactly the way they want it. But
I want to meet those
with
people.
complicated well, with complicated content like this, there's always room, there's always ideas in your head that you're like, if I had another couple weeks or another month or two, I could do this cool thing. But done is also beautiful, so it's exciting to see it ship, and it's in a spot where we're all really excited to see it out there and see what players have fun with it. And while it's not, I know what I said before was oh my god, maybe he's not confident in it. That's not what I meant. Was we're extremely excited to see it. We're extremely excited. Extremely excited to see it go out, and we think it's in a really good spot, and we're really excited to see what players do with that.
Awesome.
I mean,
well,
I can say that I'm terrified. I can look right into the camera and be like, I'm terrified of what it's going to be with, what it's going to be like when it ships. But that's just because, I have my own fears in life.
It's always terrifying and exciting at the same time.
Yeah, to be a developer is to always have a slight amount of fear in your heart when you send your child off to college, as it were.
This is fair. All right. Well, early congrats, all three of you. Thank you all for your time today, and good luck next week.
I have one thing I'd like to add.
Right. Oh, okay. Sorry,
if I
go
may.
ahead.
Happy birthday, Ruby.
Happy birthday, Ruby.
Thank you very
it's
much.
Ruby's
I
birthday,
appreciate
everybody.
That.
What you should do is you should go on Twitter and just at Ruby and do hashtag Happy Birthday Ruby or HBD Ruby.
God, my mentions. Thank you, Kirk. Thank you guys very much. Oh gosh, chat just exploded. Thank you guys very much. So, all right, you guys have a good weekend. Rest up before next Tuesday. All of you, thank you for hanging out with us today on Guild Chat, and we will see you in game. Bye, guys.